you. I was working with Stan Getz, and I had just gotten out of the Army when he hired me. And when I was in the Army, I was off the scene, so I was practicing every day, beating on a pad, keep my hands up. So when I joined Getz, I continued to play this pad, the rubber pad. He saw me in the hotel one day practicing. He comes up to me and says, "Stop doing that." So I said, "What do you mean?" He said, what do you mean? "I'm practicing, Stan." He said, "Don't do it anymore. That's it. Stop." So it freaked me out, man. So I went to Gary Burton, who was my roommate. I said, "Gary," I said, "Stan told me I can't practice anymore." I said, "What do you think?" He said, "What?" He said, "Well, I know what he means." He says, we're playing every night, right? And he says, "You're playing lately. It's kind of getting boring. You get this solo feature you do each night, and you're playing the same stuff. It's not very exciting." And Stan's probably right. You should probably think more about what you're doing instead of beating on the pad. So
Wow.
Burton says, yeah. So Burton pulled my coat. He said, he had a system. He's some kind, I forget the name of it, a book he was into called New Pathways of Piano Techniques. That was the book he was reading, and it was a book based on knowing what you want to do. You could apply this to anything, but we were talking about music. So you sit in a chair and you imagine what you want to sound like, and then you just do it, So when Burton plays, it's like, he explains that he's like in the front row listening to himself when he's playing a concert. He's not really present on the stage,
I dig. No, you know what it is? Maybe for a drummer it's different. I just was, Sonny Rollins practiced 12 hours a day, and when his wife passed on, he lowered it to 8 hours a day. John Coltrane.
Yeah,
So what I'm saying is those guys were still on the bandstand at night. So where's the fine line there between? Is it more of a solo instrument where because and then the other people will say, I think there's a lot of stuff going on. I understand for a drummer what Stan was saying, but at the same time, it goes back and forth between. You can't get much greater than Coltrane and Rollins, and they practice their asses off, and we're on the bandstand 6 nights a week. So I'm just trying to find this line.
Everybody's different. Everybody's different, Whatever turns you on, whatever works for you. But if you're practicing for the sake of practicing, like I was, I was beating out paradiddles or whatever it was. It wasn't
right.
Really
you weren't searching for a new land of rhythm or something like that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you feel there was a certain point, like, why would Cats recommend you for gigs? Because, you're playing with some of the most, like, elastic musicians. Getz, this one guy we focused on George Russell last time, and the guy I really want to hone in on now is the late great Don Friedman. These guys were not playing square, straight ahead stuff. Sometimes they were, I guess, but most of the time it was they were stretching the vocabulary. So, how did you learn? Did you feel at a certain point that you, were you ever consciously trying to find your own individual sound, or did you just listen to the music you liked and then tried to play like the stuff you wanted to hear, similar to what Burton was talking about?
Well, first of all, I was a kid. I was a kid at the time. This is, then I was just going for stuff. And Stan loved to swing, and I could swing good. That's why he hired me, So, but at some point, after months went by, he wanted more than that. He wanted, deeper involvement, engaging in the music, So that was his reason, I think, in hindsight, for saying that. And I was lucky because that was a prelude to getting fired. If I hadn't changed, I would have been gone because, he could have got somebody else that would give him what he wanted, and eventually he did get Roy Haynes. So, but anyway,
Wait, but I want you to explain. This is really important. Not.
Everybody's different.
No, I understand, but I'm saying when I want you to explain this to the layperson who's listening. What do you mean getting more involved in the music? A lot of drummers today, I'm not a musician, but a lot of drummers say, well, my job is to keep time. What do you mean getting more involved, more melodically? Can you stretch out on that?
Well, in my case, I was beating on a rubber pad. Well, if you take that and you take that to the bandstand, what does that do? You don't do that on the bandstand. You hit a cymbal, you try to make magic on it. You try to get a certain sound on it. and you can defeat the purpose by, you know, doing the opposite. You understand?
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's the same with a guy who practices scales all day long. I have Berkeley students used to say they practice, for hours and hours, and would never get any better. Whether if the way they practice and the head shape of their head, is so important. For example, I've had drum students who get in that rut. Drummers get into that a lot, over practice. So I tell them, take a break, take a vacation. Then they say the same thing that I thought when I was with Stan. What do you mean? What do you mean? I have to practice. I said, instead of practicing, go over to the Boston Symphony Hall and listen to the symphony rehearse. Listen to some music,
Right.
instead of beating out the drums, and improve your musicianship. Begin to hear, new things, new sounds, new ideas, Don't get ahead of yourself with your own limitations, But I mean, you're talking about Sonny Rollins, who's a genius, and it suits Nuke. It suits him to practice, it works for him, and even his practice sounds great, but when he practices, it doesn't sound like he's just running scales. I don't think. I heard him practicing one time. It sounded pretty darn good, I heard, another drummer who I love. Man, I'm bad with names today.
Yeah, you really.
Joe LaBarbera.
Oh,
Joe
great!
LaBarbera.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite drummers. And a friend of mine. He came to Berkeley one time, and he wanted to practice because he had a gig in town, and he wanted to use my studio. So I said, "Yeah, man. Well, you can practice my drums as long as I can listen to you, because I wanted to see what he's practicing, right? He's played so good." So, I stayed there, and Joe started playing my drums, and man, the cat sounded so beautiful. It's like he's playing a piano, man. He was playing all these beautiful phrases, He wasn't beating out rudiments and stuff. He was making music, It was such a treat, That's how he practiced. So, people practice different,
I'm going to say that the drummer you're talking about is Buddy Saltzman.
No, it's not Saltzman. That wasn't his last name.
Jeez.
But,
I want. Okay, so let me ask you. I mean, when you got when Burton pulled your coattails to what Getz was talking about, how did it fundamentally change? Not necessarily your time, feel, or anything, but did you even? Maybe you didn't get feedback, but how did it change? Were you more interested in being? Did you get out of the rut? And if so, how?
It was. He threw me a life raft basically, and I did it. I sat in a chair and I thought about how I wanted to play that night because, we played the same stuff every night, same songs, So I began to hear it in my head, and then when I went to the gig, I actually tried it out. I just sort of just let myself go, and when it came to my solo spot, I played pretty good, I guess. But I wasn't even there, man. It was like smoking weed or something, but I wasn't. I was sober,
Sure.
And, I was like just listening to myself, enjoying it. And afterwards, Burton came over. Stan did too. They came over and said, yeah, good solo, man. They encouraged me, So it works. This stuff works. If you've got enough technique to do it.